My name is Kathy Bystrom, and I am the Community Partnerships Manager for Fairview, but I am also the board chair for the Most FL Drug-Free Communities Coalition. So I'm just going to take a couple of minutes to give you an overview of Most FL and the work that we're doing in the community. We have been in existence in some form for about 30 years. We were part of an organization called Tri-County Youth and Family Partnership a number of years ago, which then morphed into the Forest Lake Area Partnership for Families to better define our service area. And then a few years ago, Most FL kind of broke away and became their own 501c3 at that point in time. We just felt that the work that we were doing was important enough that we wanted to kind of branch out on our own and not have kind of other things holding us back. We operate as a completely volunteer organization. We have no paid staff, and we operate financially solely on donations and occasional little mini grants that we receive and some fundraising work that we do. So what is it that we do? Well, I think in a nutshell, we leverage the passions, assets, and resources of our community to meet our mission, which is to big picture, prevent and reduce youth substance use in our Forest Lake area school districts. And we do that by employing a variety of strategies. And some of the key strategies are listed up there. Data, first and foremost. We utilize some survey data from our kids to help drive the work that we're doing to understand the substance use issues in the school district, in our school district communities, and develop our plans and our actions around that data. We work really hard to reduce youth access. We have a great partnership with the Forest Lake Area Police Department, and we work hard with our retailers and our PD with compliance checks to really keep substances out of the hands of our kids, particularly alcohol, tobacco, and most recently vaping products, which we're really struggling with, and part of the reason why we're here tonight, to engage our community in reducing access and hopefully preventing and reducing use of this substance. We work with other partners to promote protective factors in the community. So you see our Lake Center for Youth and Families, our Forest Lake YMCA, and our PD, of course, as well. And those protective factors are the things that keep kids safe and healthy in a community. Probably the biggest protective factor they have are parents and other caring adults in their world. So it's great to see you all here. And I think our main and kind of creative strategy that we utilize is we really work hard to correct misperceptions about youth substance use in the community. And we're here tonight because we have an issue. We have a growing issue with vaping and the perception of harm around vaping. And we want to correct and get some facts out to the community and correct some misperceptions about that. But I think the biggest misperception we have is everybody's doing it. And that's not what our data tells us. Our data tells us that most of our kids are really making good choices, and we want to keep it that way. And when we think about kind of this social norms marketing, you can kind of see this poster up here, focusing on the positive. When we think about that, we think about two key ideas with this, is that behavior is influenced by what is perceived to be the norm in a community. So if kids think everybody's doing it, their behavior is going to reflect that, and that most people misperceive norms. So one of our major strategies that we utilize is to correct those norms in our community, and we've had great success with that around alcohol and a significant reduction in youth alcohol use in this community, and with the perception of harm around marijuana. A lot of communities have really seen a steady decrease in the perception of harm around marijuana. We've been able to hold that level by correcting that misperception. This is just a quick look at our Most FL membership, so you can see it's a multi-sector organization, all working together, again, us leveraging our assets and strengths and coming together to keep our young people safe and substance-free. And I think this is what I want to leave you with before I turn it over to Heidi. I think we have an opportunity here with all of you tonight. You are, as parents, and I would say as other caring adults in our community, probably our best prevention strategy. If you look at this second bullet stat up here, parents and other adults should clearly communicate with their children about the importance of not using, and in this particular case, this is an alcohol stat, but you can fill in the blank here with absolutely any other substance that there is. And in grades 7 and 8, 89% of our kids strongly agree with that. And if we pull in kind of that ambiguity side of it, the ones that answered rather neutral, or they don't agree or disagree, that jumps to almost 100%. They're just not necessarily wanting to give us the answer they really are thinking about on that survey. And even in grades 9 through 12, when we see substance use increase significantly, 76% of our kids agree or strongly agree that their parents should be talking to them. So if we leave you with nothing more than that message tonight after this presentation, the importance of talking to your kids about this and the risks and harm associated with vaping or other substances, we will have done our job here. So again, welcome, and with that, I'm going to turn it over to Heidi. Heidi Larson is a health promotions manager with the American Lung Association in Minnesota. She provides training and technical assistance to tobacco grantees throughout Minnesota. Heidi has been with the American Lung Association for 2 years, raising awareness and passing policies that reduce tobacco's harm, especially for populations disproportionately impacted by tobacco, such as those with mental health or substance use disorders. Additionally, Heidi leads a team focused on passing tobacco policies such as smoke-free multi-unit housing and Tobacco 21. Join me in welcoming Heidi.
Thanks, Kathy. And thank you, everybody, for having me tonight. I'm Heidi Larson with the American Lung Association. And a little bit about why I'm here. As Kathy mentioned, I do provide training and technical assistance to different grantees throughout the state. And we do also subcontract with Washington County Public Health and Environment to provide support for their tobacco-free living strategy. So supporting smoke-free multi-unit housing and other various educational opportunities. So big thanks to them for that great partnership and why I'm able to be here tonight. And I always talk a little bit about why I do what I do. The American Lung Association has a very clear vision and mission. The vision is to see a world free from lung disease. The mission that drives that is to save lives by improving lung health and preventing lung disease. We have a lot of different initiatives that really work towards this vision and mission. We have folks working on clean outdoor air, biodiesel, electric vehicles. We have folks dedicated to lung health issues, so COPD, asthma, lung cancer, and then of course tobacco is huge. It's the #1 preventable cause of death and disease in our country and has been for many years. Just to put it into a little bit perspective, 480,000 people die in our country each year from tobacco-related disease and illnesses. And that's more than things like murders, suicides, car accidents, drugs combined. And I don't mention that to downplay any of those causes of death, of course, but just to put it in perspective that this is something we definitely are really working on. And of course, looking at the youth population and e-cigarettes, youth e-cigarette use is an epidemic, and we definitely believe that. So really quick, what we're just gonna go over tonight, talk about some of the smoking rates, go briefly over some data from the Minnesota Department of Health Youth Tobacco Survey, identify some actual e-cigarette products and tobacco products, learn about the impact of commercial tobacco and what we can do about it. And I just want to be clear when I'm talking about tobacco products, e-cigarettes, electronic cigarettes are tobacco products. When they first came on the market 10-ish years ago or so, the FDA saw these devices and thought, oh, we could regulate these as a drug delivery system and possibly a smoking cessation tobacco treatment device. What a great idea. And Big Tobacco actually sued the FDA and won to say that they did not want to be regulated as a cessation device. They just wanted to be on the market. So when that happened, these products did become eventually under the category of tobacco products. So we'll talk about some popular products tonight, things like Juul, Sorin, vape pens. I mean, they go by so many different names, but those are all tobacco products. And it really just shows the deceit and the dishonesty that big tobacco has. Now, the FDA is trying to crack down on some of these companies, and these companies are trying to say that they are for adults only and they are cessation devices, when years ago there was a lawsuit that they won saying that they were not. So, background on what are these products and what is a tobacco product as I talk about that. So really quick, just to provide context, in Minnesota, the current general adult population is smoking at a rate of about 13.8%. This data actually recently just came out last month, and it just shows the smoking prevalence has steadily decreased. And this is just the general adult population, remember. So it's not looking at youth, it's not looking at different subpopulations. For example, people with mental health, substance use disorders, race, gender, just the general adult population. Varies a little bit by age group. It also varies by tobacco product. So again, e-cigarettes is up here. And this is the adult data, but cigarettes still remain the #1 product used by Minnesota adults, but e-cigarettes are definitely on the rise. And then when we look at our youth population, they have increased dramatically. So again, just some prevalence of e-cigarette use, and you can see the younger age group in the adult category, 18 to 24, is higher, and you can even see the jump from 2014 to 2018 on the far left side there. And this is an interesting side to pay attention to. So again, I know this is only looking at adults, but just to provide some context and some more background on the numbers. In 2014 and 2018, there was information or a survey asked about the smoking status among those who used e-cigarettes at least once in the last 30 days. So if you can see, those who have never smoked, that has dramatically increased from 11.7% to 44%. So more and more people are using these devices that have never smoked. We're not sure if you're thinking about youth and kids, maybe there's somebody who never would have picked one up, or maybe they would have picked up cigarettes, combustible cigarettes anyway. But it's just really important to see the actual numbers and what's happening in our state. Compared to a national landscape, our state, the adult population is not the highest, not the lowest, but overall we're trying to decrease. And then in Washington County, a little bit more specifically, this is information from the Minnesota Department of Health, so you can find this on their website. If you look at the adults who smoke cigarettes and the total population, it's a little bit higher than the state average. And then this is just some youth data in Washington County. So it looks at 9th graders and 11th graders by different tobacco product type. And this data is actually probably very old and outdated by now, even though it's only a couple years old. New estimates that we have are putting e-cigarette use much, much higher. Okay, so one big thing that came from these surveys in the Minnesota Department of Health youth tobacco survey that was done was that for the first time in 17 years in our state, youth tobacco use has increased. And that is because of e-cigarettes. So the smoking rate has steadily declined, which is very, very positive. It was not all bad news, but looking at e-cigarette use, and they are tobacco products, it has caused our youth tobacco use to increase for the first time in 17 years. And that's 50% increase since just 2014, a few years ago. So as I was mentioning, the youth smoking combustible tobacco products is down, but what's driving the trend in overall tobacco use to increase is the e-cigarettes. And some of this information, again, is probably already outdated with some of the new numbers that we're getting. And why is this happening? So big tobacco has had aggressive marketing to our kids. Their marketing plan was to addict an entire new generation to another tobacco product, which does have harm and does have consequences for your lung health, your overall health, learning, memory, attention span. E-cigarettes, e-juice, these products come in all different types of flavors. I mean, you name it, it's out there. I've seen everything from vampire blood to unicorn tears. I mean, there's just crazy flavors out there. Cotton candy, gummy bears. And I don't think that an adult grandma who is trying to really reduce her tobacco use or address her tobacco use is going to be going and buying gummy bear and cotton candy e-cigarettes to help her quit. So there was a very clear marketing plan in place when these flavors were created by Big Tobacco. So for those who maybe don't know, just a quick e-cigarette 101, they come in all different shapes and sizes. They are, on the left side, there's more looks like combustible tobacco products. It's a ciga-like product. It's a disposable e-cigarette. So it's really hard to tell from far away if somebody is using one of these products or a combustible cigarette. In the middle there's more of a tank or a mod system. Mod device is what they're called. So they can be pretty high tech. You can change the temperature setting in the coil, and you can change how much vapor is emitted, the cloud of smoke. So if you're ever driving down the highway behind somebody and maybe you see just this huge plume of smoke come from the car, it's most likely somebody in the car is using one of those larger tank devices. And then on getting more towards the right side, those are some of the newer products. So Juul is very popular. It takes over most of the market share. They are in bed with Big Tobacco now. Big Tobacco did purchase some of the company, so there's definitely agenda behind that. And then on the far right, those are Soren. So I've heard from some of my colleagues too in other states that the Juul is so yesterday and the Soren is the it new thing. So these are always changing, comes in all different shapes and sizes. There's just another graphic showing the different types. But some quick facts, nearly all of these products do contain nicotine. So this is an unregulated market. I could go home and cook up my own e-juice and sell it to you, and you would have no idea what's in it. It's hard to know exactly what you're getting. So along with different flavoring agents and different chemicals, most often, nearly all of these brands do contain some form of nicotine or some amount of nicotine. So there are some products out there that claim that they're 0% nicotine or no nicotine, nicotine-free, which we know nicotine is the addictive substance. But when we tested them, random sample of a bunch of different products, it was 99% actually did contain nicotine, even if they claimed that they did not. They are not an FDA-approved smoking cessation device, so we would recommend first and foremost somebody working to address their tobacco use to use an FDA-approved method, so nicotine replacement therapy, patches, gum, lozenges, other medications. We know that no amount of nicotine is safe for youth. It really does harm the developing brain. Compared to youth who have never used e-cigarettes, it's estimated that they're twice as likely, and I'm actually just hearing that we're getting new data that's putting that as even 4 times as likely to start smoking combustible cigarettes as well. And these products are still harmful. We do know they can cause irreversible lung disease and damage. We get the question a lot, what's in that vape cloud? Is that really harmful? It might be kind of hard to see up here, but there are harmful chemicals, heavy metals, some of them are listed up there, that are contained in that vape cloud. The only substance in the entire world that can produce water vapor is water. So unless you're putting only water into these devices, you're going to be getting something else. So some of the popular products, and I have some examples with me as well. Maybe you saw them on your way in, but one hot item right now is the Juul. And it's really interesting because some youth and even parents don't even realize that these are e-cigarette products. Some youth also don't associate them as a tobacco product. They don't say that they're vaping, they're juuling. So it sounds harmless. Fruity flavors as well can really hook kids. So here's some of the flavors and a little bit of the anatomy of it. So basically there's a battery that heats the pod and then produces the aerosol. One pod contains the same amount of nicotine as an entire pack of cigarettes. So we're seeing this is very, very much contributing to why they are so addictive. If you think years ago, if a youth was smoking, maybe in school or it was sneaking, so maybe one at lunch or one after school, maybe 3 cigarettes a day max. Kids can easily go through an entire pod a day. So think of that. They're getting the same amount of nicotine as an entire pack of cigarettes. So we have a whole generation that are honestly struggling with chemical dependency, nicotine dependence, and struggling with addiction. And some of these products, especially the Juul, the new technology reveals new risks. So the technology they use is nicotine salts. So when you extract nicotine from a tobacco plant, it's called freebase nicotine. And the nicotine salts are still in a liquid form in the pod, but that's just what they're called. And so when you have the freebase nicotine extracted, it has a pH such that it causes a really harsh throat hit. It does not feel good to the user, so you might have a natural coughing reaction. It's not very pleasant. So what Juul did is they added acid to that freebase nicotine to make it so it does not have that harsh effect. So it really allowed them to have such a high concentration of nicotine without that negative side effect of not feeling good and irritating your throat. So it makes it all the easier for kids to pick up one of these products. It smells like strawberries. My friend's doing it. I'm going to try it just once. And then it feels good. It tastes good. It might smell good. So they continue to use it. This is just a snapshot of how it can be so tricky to identify some of these products, and some of the examples I have in the back there when you came in are compared to common office items. So there's whiteout back there, a highlighter, flash drives. So these products are designed to look like everyday products that you might have in an actual backpack in school. Sometimes they're very hard to identify. There's also a company called Vaporware. They have some interesting products. And oh man, how annoying is it when you're gaming and you have to take a break from your game to vape? It's just the worst. So we have a solution for you, hands-free vaping technology. So there's a hooded sweatshirt in the back. It does have a drawstring where you can hook your e-cigarette. They have an adapter for the Juul or the Soren or whatever product you have. They provide a little stealth pocket that you can tuck your device into. And then in the other drawstring, you can vape and maybe blow it into your sleeve. Doesn't have to have a big vape cloud associated with it, so it can be very easy to conceal. There's also Camelback water backpacks that you might see. Vaporware has created their own little water backpack with a string for your water and a string for your vape. So I bring this up to show that it can be very hard to identify some of these products sometimes. And we have colleagues working all over the state, and one of my colleagues in Hermantown who was working to pass Tobacco 21, which is a policy where local communities can adopt to increase the legal age to purchase tobacco products from 18 to 21. But she was doing a presentation in school, and kids were vaping right in front of her, and she knew exactly what it was. And she was talking with the teacher afterwards and just talking about how students have hid these products in their bra because the staff can't search their bras, tampon wrappers. I mean, kids are very creative and can conceal these very well. And this is an important slide because it shows how addictive these products are. So the darker colored bottom line shows the average nicotine in your system in an e-cigarette with the freebase nicotine. And then the yellow is how much nicotine and how quick it gets into your brain with a combustible cigarette. So we know when you light that cigarette on fire and you take a puff, it's only a few seconds between that and the nicotine getting in your brain, which makes it so addicting. Juul, if you can see in the blue in the middle there, nearly mimics that identically to a cigarette. So youth, Juul users, kids, anybody, they're really getting that high concentration of nicotine very quickly into their systems, which is leading to addiction. And we get a lot of common questions, so I'm just going to go over a few. So are e-cigarettes less harmful than cigarettes? When you light a cigarette on fire, the combustible tobacco product, you are releasing about 6,999 chemicals and exposing yourself to that. So that's a lot. We know that that combustion and that combustible tobacco product is very harmful. It is the only product that when used as designed and used as intended will kill over half of its users. So we know that. So we get this question a lot, well, aren't e-cigarettes less harmful? Wouldn't that be something we would want to promote? The American Lung Association takes a very strong stance on these products and that we do not promote their use. For a few reasons I've already mentioned, they're not an FDA-approved smoking cessation device, they're unregulated, they do still contain nicotine, and they can cause irreversible lung damage. We do have some short-term and working on longer-term studies on the harmful effects of these products. So the standard that everybody should have is breathing clean air. And if you're doing anything less than that, that is not good for you. So we are not for these products. We would not promote their use. So yes, it might have a lesser number of chemicals than the 6,999. However, there are still a lot of flavoring agents that can cause lung disease, lung damage. The vape cloud that is emitted does also have chemicals in it. So these products do not come without harm. And as I've already been mentioning, isn't that, the vapor that's emitted, it's cleaner, isn't it just water vapor? Well, no, we do know there are some harmful chemicals. The aerosol produced is not only water vapor. There's some listed up there, nicotine, heavy metals, the flavors as well. So popcorn lung is something you might hear of as well. When popcorn factory workers were working with this flavoring agent, they were actually developing lung disease. So some of these same flavoring agents are used in these products. And again, some of the health risks, e-cigarettes do contain nicotine, they do contain chemicals. Nicotine is highly addictive, can harm the adolescent brain. We know that our brains are still developing until about the age of 25. So really, these products are changing the brain chemistry in our youth. Youth who use e-cigarettes are more likely to go on to use traditional combustible cigarettes. Remember that, twice as likely or 4 times as likely now, more estimate. In the short term, you can experience some irritation in your lungs, maybe get sick more often, catch colds, the flu more often. So those are just some general health effects. Is this really an epidemic? So federal government agency has declared that this is an epidemic, youth e-cigarette use, and we do believe this. Yes, it is true. The federal government does not declare an epidemic lightly. You might hear maybe the opioid epidemic. It's something that does not happen very often. So when this happened and it was declared an epidemic, really it's something to pay attention to. And there was a Surgeon General warning just this last mid-December that came out that supported this as well. The Surgeon General also does not issue warnings very lightly, so this is something to really pay attention to. We do know that it is an epidemic. Youth, as I have been mentioning, sometimes don't realize how much harm they can get with these products, and they are so addicting, and addiction can happen very quickly. I've already talked a little bit about these are not FDA-approved smoking cessation devices. Anecdotally, we have heard of people using or trying to use these devices to quit, but we do see more success when you use counseling combined with an approved FDA method. And then I have a few slides that come from the Minnesota Department of Health. They created a toolkit, which I have a few copies in the back. Otherwise, you can just search Minnesota Department of Health e-cigarettes and you'll find this. So they have a toolkit for schools, really some sample curriculum, some educational materials, resources on how to address this epidemic that is happening. So I encourage you to check that out. But I have a few slides just to show some very basic examples, things that you can share with others, other parents, kids, some of these quick facts that I've covered a little bit more in depth already, but just to kind of go through these. Nicotine harms the developing brain, can affect learning, memory, attention span. The brain learns the addiction, so the earlier the exposure, the greater the risk. You're actually changing your brain chemistry if you're a youth who's using nicotine or using these e-cigarettes, these products. You can really make your brain more susceptible to other addictions and a lifelong addiction. And it happens quickly. It can happen within a few days, a week. So if somebody is maybe trying out one of these products in the school bathroom thinking, oh, it smells like creme brulee, this is a good thing, this might taste good. And I'm not gonna get addicted, that's just harmless. It can happen quickly. We do see kids struggling with chemical dependency and addiction in schools all across Minnesota. There's also that increased risk for other substance use, some listed up there, alcohol, other drugs. And this is a very shocking statistic that I would estimate is probably even higher if we did the numbers today. 1/3 of high school e-cigarette users report having used their vaping device for recreational marijuana. Kids are very crafty, even though the Juul is something called a closed pod system, which means you're not supposed to be able to refill it or change the juice that's in there. YouTube it, you can figure out how to do it. You can also buy like the Soren products, they're refillable. So when kids are using e-cigarettes, they are also using them for recreational marijuana. And it does not have the traditional marijuana smell that you would expect from a combustible product. So it can be very easy to conceal. Increased risk of smoking, of course, I've been mentioning that. E-cigarettes have been heavily advertised and widely available. Social media is huge. I know maybe you've heard on the news that the FDA is really trying to crack down on Juul and their social media presence. Juul has made a claim that they are cleaning up their social media, only using adult images. Well, I would say the damage has really already been done. Kids are, youth, even adults, very good at sharing social media posts, Snapchat, Instagram, Facebook, I mean, you name it, it's out there. If you just search or YouTube vape tricks, you'll see very young kiddos even doing vape tricks with their devices and making these clouds. So really the social media presence has already been very huge. Even though there's maybe steps being taken to reduce that, damage has already been done. And if you haven't seen any of these, it's probably because you're not the target. Kids do see them. New technologies reveal the new risks. The Juul, we talked about the nicotine salts and how those are so addicting with the high concentration of nicotine. Fruit, other flavors, these products come in. So I don't want to be all bad news tonight. There's some good news. What are things that we can do? What are some steps that we can take? So for parents, and again, this is from the Minnesota Department of Health, you can find all this information and more on their website as well. Learning about these different types of products is a great first step. So by being here tonight, educating yourself, maybe learning something new about these products, that's a great first step. It's not going to really change youth behavior or decrease that epidemic, but it is a good first step. Talk to your kids. So have a conversation about these products, about tobacco use. Really set that expectation that your house is tobacco-free, including e-cigarettes. And then be that way yourself. So set a good example, be a role model, be tobacco-free yourself, and talk with your kids about it. And I would say that nobody is exempt. I've even had colleagues who work in tobacco control who search their kids' backpacks and find some of these devices. So even though mom or dad maybe has this role where you have all this knowledge and all this information, you know, any kid is susceptible to it. So I would say just know that. And of course, you can find more information, more resources from the Minnesota Department of Health's website. Recommendations for schools and school staff. Similar to the parents, the education is a great first step. So learning more about these products, the risks they pose for youth, how to actually identify some of these products is a great first step. Develop, implement, and enforce tobacco-free school policies. So these can vary by school. So the Minnesota Clean Indoor Air Act, our state law, does say that schools must be tobacco-free, but it really does cover inside and doesn't always address the outside areas. So by developing and adopting a comprehensive tobacco-free policy, including all these different types of products, all areas of the campus, wherever your school is, the location, is really the gold standard that needs to happen. And then creating a tobacco-free environment, so really just promoting, health and wellness and what's expected of students and staff is so important, and talking about it. Also, it's important to be aware of some youth prevention programs that are put out by the tobacco industry. I know there have been schools in Minnesota that have been approached by Big Tobacco with what looks like a very well-intentioned smoke-free program or tobacco-free program. We don't want kids smoking. At first glance, it might look good, it might look nice, but be very aware that there is a hidden agenda behind that curriculum. These products, these curriculums have been tested, and we do know that they are actually not effective in decreasing youth tobacco use because it is created by the tobacco industry, and they have their profit in mind. So the American Lung Association, along with the Minnesota Department of Health, we do have links to some sample curriculum that you can use, again, in that e-cigarette toolkit. So definitely be aware of that and check there. Communities can take action. So really taking action at the local level is very important. So a lot of the state is covered by clean indoor air laws regarding e-cigarettes, and actually just today we have 3 tobacco bills that have been introduced, and they passed the first committee a week or 2 ago, and then just today they passed in the House and the Senate. So looking at including e-cigarettes in our clean indoor air law, which currently they are not. And then looking at Tobacco 21, which is that initiative to raise the age to purchase tobacco products from 18 to 21 years old. So these have not been passed or voted on, but they're moving through the legislative session right now, which is very encouraging to see. And then the last one is increasing cessation funding. So if you go home or see on the news some tobacco bills, that's very encouraging. But all of that happens why all that happens is because local communities take action. So we're very fortunate in our state that we're set up, whatever the state law says or whatever the federal law says, we can take it a step further. We can go further and provide further restrictions locally in our communities. So that would be comprehensive tobacco-free policies in schools. There's some listed up here, increasing the minimum age to purchase tobacco products from 18 to 21, increased funding for comprehensive cessation, prevention, tobacco control. So communities definitely can take action, and it is very important to be aware of that. Policy works, that's really what we know can help decrease this epidemic. The American Lung Association does also have some resources, some information on creating tobacco-free schools. So looking at your current tobacco-free policy, offering recommendations, suggestions. We are able to support that. So if there's a school or a community that is interested in reviewing their current language, we work closely with the Public Health Law Center. I'm not an attorney, but they are, and they know all the legal terms and the legal language and the best language to use. So that's something that we're able to do, is provide some support to review that and really make sure that the tobacco policy is comprehensive. And then I do also want to just briefly touch on tobacco treatment, tobacco dependence treatment, or sometimes referred to as cessation. What is available, what is out there? I know we are definitely getting this question a lot, especially with our youth. But just in general, the American Lung Association has a program called Freedom from Smoking. It is available in a few different forms, online, in-person clinics. There's a paper guide that you can get. We don't host the in-person clinics on a regular basis. What we do is we train facilitators to go back to your own community and host these clinics. We give you everything that you would need to do that. We also have a lung helpline and tobacco quit line at 1-800-LUNG-USA. This exists for any question lung health related whatsoever. So if you have a question on your child's asthma or your brother's COPD, you can call and talk to a medical professional and get an answer. You can also talk and inquire about addressing tobacco use as well. And then more locally here, excellent resource, Quit Plan Services in Minnesota. We're very fortunate to have that. So quitplan.com, their phone number is also listed up here. They have quit coaches. You can talk to somebody 24/7. So if it's the middle of the night, you're having a bad craving, you can call and talk to a quit coach about it. They can even offer free nicotine replacement therapies, patches, gum, lozenges for adults, 18 plus. We'll talk about what they have available for youth. And it does serve the uninsured and underinsured. But if you're ever in doubt and you live in Minnesota, call them, because they will be able to get you directly connected with somebody who can support addressing your tobacco use. And then for youth, what is available? Minnesota youth as young as 13 years old can access some of Quit Plan services. So again, when in doubt, call and ask. Not all services, unfortunately, are available to youth, so they would not be able to provide the nicotine replacement therapies, but they can provide some services. Youth might be eligible for phone coaching as well. I know this is really teeny tiny to see, so I can just mention what's up here. It's just some more cessation resources for youth. and I can always make this available. I know I have some of my business cards on the table as well, so if you want any of these copies or information, I'm happy to provide them. Just feel free to shoot me an email. So Quick Plan Services, I know I talked about that already. teen.smokefree.gov is another great resource. So there's information for youth. There's an app that youth can download to work on addressing their tobacco use. Health plans, so depending on the health plan that you have, there might be some resources available. Becomeanx.org, there is a program that is specifically designed for youth. It's a text program to address vaping. So there is a lot more to come. The CDC, Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, has deemed this year the year of cessation. So more will be happening with youth cessation as well. We know there's kind of a gap right now. There's some services available, but more information will be coming. But those are just some of the resources that you can look up, get more information, talk about the education piece with your kids. And I know we're going to have time for questions during the panel presentation. I think we're just about ready for that. So if anybody has a burning question right now, maybe I have a couple minutes, but then I want to open it up for the panel later on. So feel free to let me know if you have anything right now. Otherwise, yeah. Yeah, so the question is, we were talking about tobacco-free, smoke-free policies in schools. Do these exist in parks? So it depends on local action. So there are, and in Minnesota, it is perfectly legal to go through that process and have a smoke-free park. So smoke-free parks do exist. It kind of depends on the county, the city, the locality, and what's going on. You can find more information on lung.org about that, but that's a great point. Where our kids are playing, are those areas tobacco-free, smoke-free? Not always, but there are certain localities that can adopt these policies. Good question. Sure.
In your experience, what's the reason the FDA has been so slow to move
Yeah, so the question was, in my experience, why has the FDA been so slow to move? That's a very good point. I'm glad you brought that up. So the FDA has been in the news more recently saying that they're going to crack down, they're going to regulate, they're going to take flavors off the market. I would say that is awesome to hear, but don't hold your breath. We do know they move very slowly. Variety of reasons. We're still waiting for graphic warning labels in our country. And that was something that there's a lot of legal lawsuits going on, and the FDA has said that we're going to move forward with that, and we're still waiting on that 10-ish years past down the road. So, again, local communities taking action, states taking action definitely can help to spur that along, but that's why local support is always so important too. So it's not really an answer to why they're moving so slow, but government agency, they can be slow to move. Good point. All right, well, I think with that, we'll go ahead and move into the panel.
Awesome. And if we could just start with introductions and just work your way down.
I'm Jim Caldwell. I'm the principal at Forest Lake Area High School. I've been in Forest Lake School District for about 15 years now.
John Paul, J.P. Jacobson, the principal at the middle school here in Forest Lake, and I'm working on my 4th year, but having worked in middle schools for about 20.
I'm Jennifer Richard. I'm the Dean of Students at Lakes International Language Academy at the Headwaters Upper Campus, and I have been with Leela for about 6 years.
Megan Olstead, Forest Lake Police. I'm the high school resource officer at Forest Lake High School.
I'm Michelle Shorn. I'm a nurse practitioner at Fairview Medical Group.
I'm Jason Siegel, and I'm a therapist at Lakes Centers for Youth and Families.
Awesome. Thanks for being here. Are there any burning questions from the audience? While we're waiting for our first person to ask the question, just wondering, what are you seeing at the school level with vaping, e-cigs, all of those things?
Sure, JP Jacobson Middle School. So I think what we're seeing is much like all schools statewide are seeing right now. Kids are seeing this as kind of an in vogue sort of behavior. It's kind of the newest thing. We're seeing a bit of an uptick in this from previous years. Kids will find ways and access to how to get them, either from an adult or from an institution that won't properly check IDs when they're buying them. And for parents, when we call them, when a mistake has been made, oftentimes they're just completely blindsided. They didn't know what it looked like. They didn't know what to look for. Immediate questions are, where do they get it? They're a little bit in shock. And so, from a school standpoint, we're really taking a number of avenues to try to get in front of this. So through our health classrooms, we're teaching the risks to this sort of behavior, and that it is a gateway to stronger and more dangerous drugs. And even within our e-cigs, there's a lot of chemicals that can be really dangerous. We're reaching out to parents like on evenings like this. I think Kathy Bystrom at the beginning of the night talked about just breaking down the misunderstandings that kids have, where kids think that everybody's doing it and everybody approves of it, when the reality is something quite different. And so through our positive community norms, it's been a really successful part of our campaign around this. And then ultimately it's talking to kids when they make mistakes and helping them get the access to resources that they need once they do. And so that's how we're tackling it at the middle school. I know the high school is very similar. So that's what we're seeing. Anybody else?
I have been seeing a lot of questions from kids in the clinic. They're questioning if this is safe for themselves, so I know that they are questioning that. I also like to say that what Heidi said about parent involvement and talking with their kids is very important. To be open with your kids, be talking to them, not judgmental. Having those open conversations so that your kids will come to you and let you know things. From a standpoint, like she said, when they're smoking those Juuls and they're getting a pack of cigarettes a day in one of those Juuls, think about the marijuana use as well, because that is something that's up and coming. We never hear about overdoses of marijuana when they're just taking puffs off of a joint, but when they're taking them through the vaping system, it's getting into their system more, and they are overdosing on that as well.
The only thing that I would add to that is it is, unlike other chemicals and things that we deal with, this epidemic does not discriminate. It is between all lines economically, socially. It does not matter if you're an athlete or a non-athlete. We have dealt with all walks of students at the Forest Lake High School. Not only with the e-cigs, the THC being put into the dab pens and those types of things is even a greater concern for me. We've dealt with that probably 5 times, where we have actually had kids that we've had to bring to the hospital because they don't know what they're taking. And it gets into their bloodstream and they are unconscious and away they go. All it took was 1 or 2 and we've seen a decrease. So it is totally about education and talking to the kids so they can realize what they're actually putting into their bodies.
I work with Mr. Caldwell at the high school, and I would say comparatively last year to this year, we've seen a very large uptick, specifically in e-cigs, but last year we didn't deal with THC oil at all. And in our community, I think that this is our scariest upcoming issue, that these kids are finding very creative ways to think of something that they could compare to smoking marijuana in a joint, and now they're smoking it oil. The concern about oil is that it's in its purest form, and hang on one second. When you look at it in its purest form, it changes only if they do get in trouble. Plant-based form, it's usually a petty misdemeanor crime. So when we're dealing with kids who are smoking it in an oil form, we're dealing with a different level of a crime. So what we've been trained is that you compare plant-based percentages. When you test plant-based marijuana, it is 10 to 15% potency. So a kid who smokes a joint, the potency of that joint is going to be about 15% THC. The oil is 95%. So they're getting addicted very, very quickly, just like nicotine oil or anything else.
And I guess from our experiences, which, much smaller population, but still students that see it, they wonder about it, they ask about it, and a lot of students in being surprised at what their students do know about it, what their kids know, how easy it is to get, who told them what, the accuracy of information. And that's the part about some parents tend to want to go into that lecture mode when it's more about just engaging in a conversation, and maybe you drive past a vape shop, or you drive past and you see an ad of something, or just to kind of make it that real safe environment that you can say, and guarantee there's just a lot more sharing going on, and it's just kind of come from that very just place of position of care, and saying, just let's talk about it.
Someone in the audience must have been reading my mind, because this was the same question I was going to ask next. So what are the school consequences if you get caught?
You guys want to touch on that, or do you want to? So the biggest difference with having an SRO or even just an officer being called to any school is that the school is typically going to deal with this firsthand. And there's school policy, and then there's criminal law. And so us as police officers, we step in after the school has conducted their own investigation, and they deal with the school consequences. But then when schools are recovering, whether it be a pocket knife at school, or whether it be alcohol that someone brought in, or what it used to be cigarettes, now it's, nicotine-based vaporizers or our THC oil. So when I get it in my lap, I have to explain to parents the scary things about this. Biggest concern is how fast kids are getting addicted. And most kids, the first thing they're going to say to us is, well, I'm not addicted, I've only done it a couple times. But you can see that sometimes with kids, there's a reason why they want to try it, and some kids truly are just experimenting. But on the criminal end of things, we usually deal with the juvenile diversion. We go through the Lake Center for Youth and Families for that. So generally with tobacco violations or nicotine violations, their first offense, they're going to go and take some type of a tobacco or nicotine class. If it's THC oil, because that's a higher level of offense, we want to get those kids in the court system so they can talk with a probation officer or a judge or a county attorney to see if there's any assessments that they need with that family. Give that family resources, whether it's a social worker, whether it's a chemical evaluation, and we're going to let the county attorney handle that to see what those needs are for that family.
From the school side, before we even get to the law enforcement side, at the Forest Lake High School, your first offense, it's really about education. We do contact parents. We normally have them come in, we have a conversation, and that young man or lady will most likely go home for that day, and then they're back the next day. If it does happen again, we do give you some time to go seek some counseling, and we give you more resources and those types of things. Second offense, in most cases, is a 3-day suspension. Then the next one after that's 5, and then we go up to 10 after that. We contemplate this every time that we get to that 5 and 10, because it's really not about beating up the kid. It's about how do we get those resources. So when I'm dealing with a family who is jumping through the hoops with the child, they're going to counseling, they're seeking help, that's a little different than the family who's throwing up their hands saying, well, my kid's just a teenager, they're going to do what they're going to do. So it's really twofold, and it's a working relationship with that parent.
I can jump in for a second. Just as a therapist at Lake Center, where we do a lot of intervention work with kids who are coming to us, I think 75% of the kids that come to Lake Center for the first time are coming because of e-cigs. It's a crazy large number. One of the services that we're always going to start with is evaluating what the needs of this kid might be. Because some kids are experimenting with something, and some kids, this is a symptom of a larger problem. So whether they need just a bit of education class, or whether they need full-scale individual therapy, family therapy, things like that, we're always going to start with an assessment to help them figure out, and help the family figure out what they might need. And all those resources are available depending on what that kid is going to benefit from. I will say, too, that when it comes to talking to kids about the dangers that this kind of behavior can have, one thing you need to keep in mind, at least from my perspective as a therapist, is kids' brains are different than adult brains. You're talking about how human beings, our brains don't finish developing until age 25. One of the things that does is that different parts of our brain develop at different times. So the part that's called the amygdala, which is where your emotions are kind of centered, that part develops a lot earlier than the frontal cortex, which is kind of your decision-making part of your brain. And what that means is that kids actually are not as capable as adults of connecting what they're doing in the moment to long-term consequences. It doesn't mean that you shouldn't hold them accountable for their choices, but it does mean that armed with all the facts and a really well-reasoned argument about future consequences, that's only going to go part of the way probably. So some of that is going to fall on parents to continue to exercise the structure and authority that they need to have in the home. Kids are going to respond to emotions better than they do sometimes to facts and logic. It's just how their brains are developing.
Frustrating as a parent because you talk about you talk your kids about this and how unhealthy it is. And then you have in the media that the state of Minnesota and all these people want to legalize recreational marijuana. And these kids look at you like, well, it should be legal. And you're like, well, it's not. And it's not good for you. But it's very frustrating as a parent because you're trying to teach them that and then you have all this. I mean, how are we coming along with that? I mean,
I think that they need to know that legal marijuana is not given with vape. It's not given with a joint. It's given with oral sublingual oils or pills. And that's what we're going to be using if that were to become legalized in Minnesota, and that's what they're using in other states from a medical standpoint.
It's a conversation I have with kids regularly. A lot of kids will come and be like, I've talked with my therapist and I know that I'm not using it medically, and I explain just as she has here that there's a legalized portion of marijuana use, but it's only specified reasons, and it's approved and it's regulated by the FDA, so they know how much marijuana is in that form that they're getting prescribed. And a lot of kids like to argue and banter when they're confronted with that conversation, because I explain to them that you're never going to get marijuana that makes you feel the way you feel when you're smoking it at 90%, 95% THC oil based. And that's the biggest problem, trying to explain to kids that it's going to be different. So the stuff that if it is ever legalized here or like in any other state, it's not going to have a 90% potency.
It's the stuff that they're vaping and the stuff that we have a lot of people in the clinic that come in and say they're using medical marijuana and they are not being watched by a physician. So they're not, and I tell them, it's not legal in Minnesota. So if you get caught with this, it's a punishable offense. But when they talk about legalizing marijuana for medical use, like she said, there are certain conditions, inflammatory conditions, chronic pain management, PTSD. There are certain conditions, and each state dictates what those are for that use, because every state is different on what they agree to use the medical marijuana use for. Is there any other questions with that? Yes? Yes, and cancer is one of those chronic pain managements, because people usually are in a lot of pain with cancer, which is an indication for use. And as a provider, I do not I'm not registered to do medical marijuana, but there are a few physicians within Fairview that do that, and it is being used currently for chronic pain. And it's a really refined form. It's not like your typical marijuana. It's refined. It's controlled. It's going to be controlled. The pill forms come in like 25 milligram tablets. So we know how many milligrams it is. We know it's not like you're getting something, you put it in something, you smoke it, and you don't know what you're taking.
No, we have a question.
All right, I have a question. Being a parent of teenagers currently, and being very open with them about what's going on in the schools, and from their perspective, in the high school, and this is just, who knows if this is a rumor, we know you're saying the percentages or whatever, but I'm hearing like 80%, like mom, everyone vapes. So what my question is, again, to the kids that are the ones we're catching, there's obviously a lot more. So how do can we just do like, I mean, smack down on, let's just check backpacks, let's, I mean, it comes like Jim said, in every, you've got your athletes, it's not, it's the whole gamut. It's not like when we were younger, you could maybe pick out some people, but it's the whole gamut. So how do we target those other kids that are not getting caught? Like wherever they're doing it in the bathroom and in the classrooms.
I mean, the answer is yes, we could put the smackdown down. We really could. I've talked about it. Let's put the tables up. Let's search everybody when they come in the door. That's going to stop it for that amount of time. Because the fact is, we cannot do that day after day after day, and it just moves it to another spot. Marijuana 10 years ago, we could have a drug dog come through the high school, and the drug dog would hit on lockers. We would not find anything in the locker. Their jackets would reek. But they figured out, we're not going to bring it to school. But where did they move it to? They moved it to the ice houses. They moved it to where they hang out before and after school. This would be no different. So for me, it's about the education piece and getting it into our health curriculums, educating parents, having those conversations with kids. I think where this is going to spike, and I think gradually it's going to start to go down. The other thing is having kids talk honestly with staff so we can have conversations with the kids that we know are not getting caught. I have an 8th grade football player, and he came home this year and he's like, Dad, you're not going to believe this. This person, this person, this person, this person, this person, this person on our football team of all teams has vaped. And my jaw hit the floor. At the high school before Christmas, we pulled some data. 84% of all of our discipline referrals the first part of the year were all around e-cigs. That's gone down since we've been walking into bathrooms more, being out and about and doing those things, but it doesn't mean the kids have stopped doing it. They're just not doing it in the school as much.
Yeah, I just want to say, from a mental health point of view, it's not so much about catching a kid when they're doing something as it is about educating them around their behavior and their choices, and also about sort of treating it from a medical point of view. Like providing treatment like nicotine cessation programs is a different thing from having kids have to interact with police and trying to scare them into stopping their behavior. Typically, that's just going to be less effective. The studies show education and treatment are usually more effective in terms of managing a public health issue like cigarettes and nicotine and e-cigs than law enforcement, like in the larger sense of it. I will also say too, while it seems like it's really, really widespread and there's really a lot of anecdotal situations like you were talking about of this kid and this kid and this kid, I will say I think that some of the statistics that most of was talking about at the beginning are also, it's important to keep that in mind. So like when your child tells you all these other kids at school are doing this, there's something going on in their head that makes it, it's not that they're lying, they do think that, that is their perception, but that's not necessarily accurate. So like, I was meeting with a girl last week who weighs probably 95 pounds, and she was telling me that most of the kids in her grade are thinner than she is, and she feels fat. She's not lying. She really does feel that way, but it's not true. So when kids see that there's a certain behavior going on and they perceive that as something that's attractive to them for whatever reason, they're going to have, they're going to misperceive how widespread it really is. And some of that is just like confirmation bias, and some of it is to make themselves feel, more adult or whatever, or honestly just to make a point in an argument with their mom, sometimes. But so I think that there are plenty of kids who are also not using e-cigs or not showing those behaviors that they can choose to associate with or be more like. Absolutely not. No, I think it's everybody's kids. Every kid has that perception of, this is a thing that happens in the adolescent brain. They legitimately look at groups of kids and they think that everyone is watching them and judging them and they are different from everybody else. It's not true, but it is how their brains work.
I think we've said tonight, hearing what I'm hearing from everybody, that there are a lot of kids doing it. That's why we're up here, and that's why we're doing what we're doing. We want to make people aware of what the consequences can be so that you can go back and you can tell your kids what are the consequences. I mean, when we talk about nicotine, if you go back before World War II, they used it as an insecticide, but it got too expensive, so they went to cheaper stuff that was more, but that's what it was used for, and we smoke that into our lungs.
JP?
And we pay a lot of money to do that.
But I want to just echo on something that I think Jason said, and I thought it was super, super key, is that one of the things that we combat here, in truth, is that kids think that everybody's doing it, so that must mean it's safe, and that it's okay, and that it's popular. And what I would say is, we haven't had as many incidences at the middle school as perhaps elsewhere in the state, but we do definitely have had an uptick. But but a lot of the times we find out about things both by being present and walking into the places where this too often happens. But I would say it's just as often that we find out because it's reported by kids who are not okay with this. And what kids will think, and this is so true, and it's not just a new phenomena, is that they believe everybody does it and everybody thinks it's okay. Not me, of course, or my friends, but everybody else does it. And we've got this tool that we use where we survey kids, and we've got questions built into the tool that determine whether they're being forthright or not. And we look for data that suggests that what kids perceived use or kids' perceived peer approval is discrepant from what is actually the case. And in many cases, and this one included, the number of kids that approve of e-cig use, so the kids that use, is vastly different what kids actually think. And that, I think, is a big point here where we have to clarify with kids that it is not necessarily the most popular thing to do, or it's not all kids do it, and you can choose to not be part of this and actually be part of the solution. And I think, so when Jason mentioned that, I just wanted to say that again. We actually did a rollout on this a couple of years ago, and it's changed a little bit since then, but when we showed kids the data on how many kids actually reported an anonymous survey, whether they had done this or not, the kids were shocked. They thought there was no way that was true. But that was actual data that we had pulled from kids and in their responses to some things that we'd asked them. So I think that that's a big piece that we want to highlight with kids as well, is that not everybody does it, and not everybody likes it when others do it.
I think if I could follow up with another question going off of what you just said, JP, is wondering what kind of tools, what's the best approach then for parents or those who are carrying adults to talk with youth about vaping or other substances?
I would say the first one, in addition to what we've just said, is the kids that do make a mistake don't think that this is a big deal, that there is really no risk here. I even had one kid tell me once that, Mr. Jacobson, the juice that my friend made it in his kitchen. And I thought, well, you have no idea what that person put in that. And so I think being present here, reading about information online, informing your kids that this is not a harmless pastime. There is some real significant risk here. And it is a precursor to more and more dangerous behaviors beyond this. And so I would say that would be the first thing that I would be talking about at home, in addition to some of the things that we've said. I'd turn it over to others too.
I mean, I would say that the fact that you guys are all here tonight is really helpful, because the information that you're getting, it's factual. It's from the American Lung Association. It's from nurses who actually have an education and have studied this kind of thing. Your kid doesn't have that information, but they do have the internet. And so they have this belief that they know a lot of things that aren't necessarily true. I think that having facts is really helpful. When you talk with your kids about something way down the road, they're not going to necessarily connect to that. When you say 30 years from now you're going to have popcorn lung, that might not necessarily have the same impact on them that it does on an adult who can think further down the road. But there are all kinds of immediate issues that are going to have some importance to them. So some of it is, you can get caught. Like, most of these kids who are in trouble, man, they're scared. You're not a terrifying looking person or anything, but police are scary to kids. And they act out of their emotions, so fear is powerful for them. And you can still provide them with the facts. So like, when GP is talking about this kid is feeling confident and he can use this substance because somebody made it in their kitchen, you know, that's insane. That's so much more dangerous, frankly. I think I've been working with kids for about 15 years now. I think back to like when ecstasy was kind of first coming out and people didn't know what was in it and being made on the street by a whole bunch of different chemists. That was much more terrifying than like pure substances. And there's facts that back this stuff up. If you are non-judgmental and respectful of your kid and you ask them to look into it, you guys can research it together. I think that can be really powerful. To say, hey, I understand what you're saying and I'm going to take your concerns seriously and I'm going to ask that you take what I'm saying seriously and let's look into this together. Because there's a ton, I mean, this is something where the facts are very much on your side. There's a ton of research that shows all kinds of harmful things. Kids also have an immediate distrust of adults, of corporations, of larger societal institutions. So some of the things that the American Lung Institute or Association is talking about as far as the marketing being pitched towards kids, that is going to be something that they will pick up on really quickly too. They're going to notice that stuff. They're going to respond to that. Nobody likes to feel like they're being exploited by a giant evil corporation that is, you know, taking money to try and give them cancer. I mean, that's basically what the tobacco industry is, right? The truth.org campaign that they had recently, like those are things that kids connect to because it feels like they're getting knowledge that adults have that's been hidden from them. They like that stuff. I think a lot of adults do too, frankly.
The only thing I would add quickly is having this conversation to a normal kid, quote unquote, is really easy. Find me a normal kid though. And when I say normal, somebody who has 2 caring parents at home, food on their table, a house over their head, they're passing all their classes, they're not dealing with anxiety, and they don't have depression. Find me a kid who has none of that, and we can have that discussion. But I've dealt with families and I've dealt with kids who have 2 loving parents. They have a roof over their head. Parents are professionals. Child's passing all of their classes, but they deal with that anxiety and depression, so they're seeking other things. So you may not be able to do it by yourself. You might have to use some of the professionals up here or seek counseling or whatever, but you cannot go about it yourself if you have a child that's dealing with those mental illnesses as well.
Hoping,
Kids at the beginning of the school year, or they've done that in the past, is that still something ongoing, or is that something that you could do?
The education that goes on at the high schools through the health class, which they get when they're in 10th grade. So we do not...
We should bring in the first week of school, even if it's for 1 hour, and explain to these kids, beginning every school year, and in junior high as well.
We can totally look at things like that. You are not wrong. I mean, we do go through the rules and we go through the consequences and all of that, but we have not done a lot of public service when it comes to that with our students. That's a great idea. I did because I knew that my butt would be up around my ears if I screwed up.
Yeah, and that's one thing I would encourage too, is for parents to talk to each other. Whether you're baseball parents or theater parents or whoever you are, talk with each other. I've got parents sometimes that are like, their child is dealing with this, but they're afraid. I don't want to talk about this, I don't want to talk to other parents. Please do. It's a great support system to have each other. And kids are so aware and they know so much more about what's going on and how they're feeling. A lot of our students are using this to help with mental health issues. Some say, I can't stop because it makes me feel good. It's the only thing that makes me feel good. And that's a very telling sign that there needs to be some intervention, some other professionals brought in for our kids.
Kathy, is your MOST program going to be like doing some more things? I think you had talked to me about doing some more things more at a student level than just a parent level too. So I think that there may be some things kind of up and coming that Fairview might be stepping in for to do as well, just at the student level.
I do have a question waiting from a young individual wanting to know, and maybe Heidi, I don't know if you would be willing to jump in, or you, Michelle, either of you. It's kind of a medical question, wondering if you could explain tobacco versus some of what we're talking about today.
Sure, just as far as what is a tobacco product, maybe? Yeah, great question. So tobacco products, some examples would be a cigarette. So you actually have to light that on fire. Cigars, also you have to light on fire. That's a tobacco product. There's chewing tobacco. There's water pipes, or hookahs is what they're called. Then electronic cigarettes. So some of the information that we've been talking about, there's battery devices that heat up the liquid. That's a tobacco product. So there's a lot of different types of tobacco products.
So kind of going off that, I would like to follow up and wonder, you know, in our community, we also have a few other schools, and I don't know if Jennifer, you'd be willing to pipe in, being present from Leela, but wondering if you're seeing similar things at your school. And one of the big questions following up with that anyone can answer too is, where are these kids getting this stuff, right? Is a question that keeps coming up.
Yeah, I would say there are times we do have a few incidences that we have already had. Our students are coming in, and we're getting more and more students in each grade. So it is, our students are reporting seeing it, buses in their neighborhood. They're walking to the park, and if they go to this particular park, it's there. And I think similar to a middle school where it's a very kind of a see something, say something, and then they want to tell everybody, and they want to figure out what it is and just get more information. And the more I think we can talk openly about it and just educate, I think it'll lead the best for all. And I'm sorry, the next part?
That was, where are they getting it from? Where in the world are they getting it from?
Oh, this is where I get told a lot. Miss Jennifer, you have no idea how easy it is to get one. You know, and I said, you're probably right. I probably don't know how easy it is. I'll be very honest. I mean, it does seem like there's always new inventive ways that they're doing it, whether it be online, someone they know, a sibling, that type of thing. That's what I've found in the research that I've been done. I'm sure the other building heads can maybe speak to more so.
I can step in and just kind of tell you guys that kids they share information when they come to us, and a lot of kids say that they can just buy it from their friends or a friend's sibling. I've had a couple kids tell me that their parents buy it for them. We have had some interesting conversations with parents about that, and that the law is not going to protect them as a parent to provide tobacco products to their minor child. So you can tell your children and kids or teenagers that anybody that does provide them tobacco, if law enforcement catches wind or we have reason to believe to investigate it, a first offense for providing tobacco to a minor is a misdemeanor, and your second offense is a gross misdemeanor, which is an arrestable offense. And so that can be a juvenile or an adult. So it is a serious crime to provide it to a minor. But you can buy them on Amazon. You can buy them on the internet. Our first THC oil case in the fall of this year, I was kind of dumbfounded. I really couldn't honestly believe that we were dealing with it, but it's here and we're dealing with it. So I did some research online, and I Googled it. It popped up, the exact thing that I had sitting on my desk, and I could use online gift cards to buy it out of some random country. And it would take 2 weeks to get it here. So MoneyGram, Western Union, and online gift cards. So you can get it anywhere.
Can police dogs detect this?
That's kind of a hard. I don't work with a canine directly. We had a new canine come up that they said that canine could not detect it at that time. But I haven't worked with a more experienced canine handler that has confirmed that they can or can't. What I can say is that when we have a THC oil dab pen sitting in front of us, you can't smell it. If you crack it open and you get your nose closer to the oil or you wipe it on a Q-tip, it has a faint odor of what marijuana would smell like, but it's not as potent as what like a marijuana joint would smell like. So it's a different smell.
You just said the word dab, what exactly is that?
That's what the kids refer to. So THC oil, I mean, the most common term kids are calling it is a dab pen or a dab. I guess I was going to step in when Jason was talking. If you're having concerns that your kids are using, keep the conversation open. That you're concerned, that you want to be there for them and help them deal with any issues that they or their friends might have. I always kind of tell parents to go to a true tell is if you drug test your kids. And it can ruin and burn a relationship, but it also can give you confirmations if your kid is clean. On Amazon, they sell a nicotine test where you can test your kids to see if they have nicotine in their system, and that will tell you if they're vaping. You can go to Walmart and buy them. So I'll just let you touch on it.
So yeah, I had a parent come to me and they were having trouble with their kid, and they asked me what was available, and I'm a Googler sometimes when it comes to stuff like this. I did Google on Walgreens, Walmart, CVS, all those things. They do have urine drug screens, and they test for things like amphetamines, methamphetamines, barbiturates, THC, benzodiazepines, opioids even. They run anywhere, like if you get the ones that are pretty comprehensive, they're about $30 a pop. You can get packs that are cheaper that have less drugs that are tested for, but they are out there, and you can do random checks on your kids. And I think that, if you have a concern that your kid is doing that it would probably be a good idea. If anything, just to prove that you're wrong. Maybe you're wrong. And that, and let your kids know, I just want to be wrong, and just like they've been saying, you got to keep an open communication and non-judgmental. I find that dealing with any kind of addiction in my clinic or anything that I deal with on a depression anxiety level, I have a lot of patients that like to come see me because I walk into it and I am non-judgmental. And so being judgmental and making it that part of a relationship is not going to help the relationship, it's only going to hinder it.
Just to be mindful of time, we are going to wrap up our panel discussion. There are surveys available if you could fill that out before you leave today. But I wanted to leave it with any last thoughts from our panel.
I guess you guys are doing a good job, and thank you guys for coming here. I think everyone on this panel really truly cares, and I think there's a lot of people in the school that care. And on a community level, like with Forest Lake Most, I think we're all trying our best. And if you have ideas and you think that you can be a part of this equation to make things better, or if you have an idea that you don't think we've thought of, don't hesitate to send an email or make a phone call, because we're willing to listen. And from the bottom of my heart, I can say we're trying our hardest. And it's not to send someone to court or to send them to, to get them a ticket or to get them in trouble. It's truly to help. I mean, the last thing we want to see, and I want to see, is dealing with these kids when they're 22, 23 years old and they're really struggling. So thank you guys for coming.
I just want to say thank you too. I kind of got jumped into this. I got a reach out from the community people, and I was like, yes, because I have been really watching this since there's not a lot of long-term studies on it. Since it's recent, we really don't know over a long period of time how this is going to affect people with e-cigarette use. So I was really, I beef up on subjects that I'm really interested in, and when I heard about the THC, I went to my sister because she told me my nephew was vaping, and her mouth dropped to the floor when I told her all of the stuff that you guys learned tonight. And so just be real, be real adamant. You guys are the starting point. I think that it was a great idea to do more of like a yearly thing, especially with kids coming into the high school, because we're seeing those age groups more. That might be, that's a great idea to move forward. And just keep educating the kids just as much as we're educating you, because if they get educated, they're going to learn, they're going to see what the effects could be, and hopefully they'll run off their emotions and say, yeah, I don't want to be like that when I'm old, and, things will improve. So.
I will say, too, that everybody who's here tonight, you now have information that you can take back to your community, whether that's, telling it to your kids or your neighbors or your friends. being able to share that information and share some of the resources is going to be really helpful. Because there are a lot of resources. This is not something that you have to feel like you as a parent are dealing with by yourself, or that your best friend as a parent is dealing with by her or himself. There's a lot of different people, whether it's law enforcement or education or youth service agencies like Lake Center. Like, there's a lot of different people who can help kids and families to deal with these kinds of problems. If you need an assessment, all the way up through actual like therapy, Lake Center can do those kinds of things. There's a lot of other places that can do chemical use assessments. There are places that can provide all kinds of services. So just recognizing that there's a lot of resources out there for you and being able to take what you guys have learned and share with others in your community, I think is really powerful. So thank you for coming.
Well, thank you very much. Yeah, thank you for being on the panel, coming tonight.